Hey everybody, this is Tony, Tainted Lord A7, and this is going to be a thread response to a thread that's going on in the VC. And this thread is called 10 Underrated Albums That Gets No Love in the VC. Basically, we just choose 10 underrated albums that either nobody ever talks about, or people just don't seem to care about it, or just no one likes it for some reason, but it's just truly underrated. So, yeah, just 10 underrated albums that gets no love in the VC. And I picked out 10 albums that I feel underrated and don't get talked about much. And no, some people might like it, some people might not like it, but it just never gets brought up. So yeah, let's go ahead and start off this thread. The first one will have to be Melvin's Stoner Witch. Now Melvins are very influential in the whole stoner metal genre during the early 90s, and they've been putting out so many albums since the early 90s up to now. And I think Stoner Witch by the Melvins is an album that I don't hear a lot of people talk about that much, and it never gets brought up when it comes to stoner metal or stoner rock. I just feel like this album was just really underrated and doesn't really get talked about too much. So this is just my personal opinion, but I really do feel like Melvin's Stoner Witch is a very underrated stoner rock metal album and a very influential one that should get more noticed. So yeah, that's my first pick, Melvin's Stoner Witch. Next up is a heavy metal. Okay, next up is a heavy metal band that also doesn't get talked about much, but should be talked about more. And it's Hitten. Yeah, Hitten and the album State of Shock. Now this is a really underrated band that really carries the torch in bringing some badass pure 80s heavy metal. Like this is just some straight up pure 80s heavy metal that's very fast, dynamic, riffy, and just blazingly fast when it comes to the guitar playing, at least to my ears. But yeah, I really do feel like Hitten's State of Shock is a very underrated album, and more people should check this album out if you're into some balls to the wall, fast, heavy metal with no fucks given, or something like that. So yeah, Hitten, State of Shock. Yeah, State of Shock by Hitten. A very underrated album that doesn't seem to get any love in the VC, at least from what I've seen, but this is some straight up balls to the wall heavy metal. Okay, next up is a very divisive band when it comes to alternative rock and um, mainstream rock, but it's Saliva, Back Into Your System. Admittedly, Saliva is one of those mainstream alternative rock bands that most people may not care about, but I really do feel like Saliva's Back Into Your System is just a really good, solid alternative rock album, and just a good rock album in general. This album definitely an album that was part of my teenage years, and I really grew up listening to most of the songs on this album. Most notably, the song "Always," which to me is an awesome song. But the whole entire album is, to me, a really good rock album that reminds you of the early 2000s. And and yeah, I really feel like this album is very underrated and gets no love. But I really do feel like more people should be talking about this album if you just want some good mainstream rock music that came out during the early 2000s. So yeah, Saliva's Back into Your System. A very, very solid rock album in my opinion. And definitely an album that should get talked about more if you want some good mainstream rock music. Okay, next up is a band I hardly ever seen anyone talk about, and that's Downfall of Gaia in the album Atrophy. Now, if you want some really good, fast, atmospheric black metal with some shoegazy moments, you can't go wrong with Downfall of Gaia. Like the riffs are fast and the tremolo pickings are just blazingly fast, and it's just everything just feels so atmospheric and just pummeling. Um and yeah, Downfall of Gaia was just a band that I never ever hear anyone talk about, and this album Atrophy is very underrated and doesn't seem to get any love. But I do feel like Downfall of Gaia's Atrophy is definitely an album that will appeal to most black metal fans who just want some fast blazing music with some shoegazy moments. And yeah, Downfall of Gaia Atrophy is just an amazing, amazing album that I think went unnoticed, but definitely deserves the spotlight. So, yeah, Downfall of Gaia's Atrophy. Okay, next up is a Canadian hard rock band that I never ever seen anyone bring up, and that's Danko Jones, Born a Lion. Now, Danko Jones are kind of like a hard rock, sleaze rock kind of band that makes you think about bands like Rat or Motley Crue. Except this is more of a hard rock sound than a straight up heavy metal sound. But yeah, I think Danko Jones' Born a Lion is an album that is very underrated and gets no love because nobody ever talks about this band or this album at all. But if you want some good hard rocking, swaggle, sleazy rock sound, you can't go wrong with Danko Jones' Born a Lion. This is just a fantastic album from a band that more people should be talking about. So yeah, Danko Jones, Born a Lion. A really good sleaze rock, hard rock um, band, and Born a Lion is just a fantastic album. Okay, next up is Paradise Lost, Believe in Nothing. Now we all know Paradise Lost as being like a death doom metal band early in their career, but during the mid period from '97 to like 2007, they had a bit of an identity crisis where they sounded more like Depeche Mode and incorporated a lot more outside mainstream influences like more alternative rock um, sound, and it's very evident on this album. Believe in Nothing by Paradise Lost is probably the most alternative rock, most mainstream rock sound they ever done in their entire career. Like, this is so far away from being gothic metal, death doom metal, or any of that. This is just a straight up alternative rock album that was really popular during the early 2000s. But I really do feel like this album is a very hidden gem that gets often overlooked, and I really enjoy this for what it is. You know, like don't come into this album thinking this is death doom metal or gothic metal. It's far from it. It's just an alternative rock album that's actually pretty enjoyable if you just take it for what it is. So yeah, definitely underrated. Definitely doesn't get any love, but I definitely feel like this album deserves the spotlight. So yeah, Paradise Lost, Believe in Nothing. Okay, next up is Sentence, The Cold White Light. Now, on this album, Sentence definitely sounds like a goth rock album. Does definitely sounds like a goth rock band, you know? Like they've drastically changed from the debut to this one, that's for damn sure. And to me, this is kind of like a goth rock album with some great riffs, some soaring vocals, and it's just an enjoyable album for what it is. And definitely an album that often gets overlooked and is underappreciated and gets no love, but I personally enjoy it. So, yeah, Sentence, The Cold White Light. Definitely an underrated album that gets no love, but I definitely urge everyone to check this out if you're into that early 2000s goth rock, almost alternative rock sound. But I enjoy it for what it is. So, yeah, Sentence, The Cold White Light. Really good stuff, in my opinion. Okay, next up is Body Count, Born Dead. Now, when it comes to Body Count, people will know this band for the self-titled debut album and the later albums like Manslaughter, Carnival, and Merciless. But I feel like Born Dead is definitely an album that gets overlooked and doesn't seem to get any love. Like, if you like hip hop, rap mixed with rock, metal, I think they've done a superb job on this one. And this is just a really angry and aggressive album. And yeah, Body Count's Born Dead is just an underrated album that needs to get more love than the VC. So yeah, Body Count's Born Dead. This is just a fantastic underrated album from Body Count that needs to, get more of the spotlight. Definitely check it out if you have it. Okay, next up it's an entirely rap hip hop album, and that's Dr. Dre's The Chronic 2001. Now, I'm not like the biggest hip hop rap fan. When it comes to hip hop or rap, I like certain songs from certain groups, but not enough to make me want to buy an album from them. But Dr. Dre's The Chronic 2001 is to me a gold standard hip hop album to end the late 90s. Like a lot of these songs are just iconic, and I grew up listening to these songs back in the day in the early 2000s. You have a lot of collaborations with Snoop Dogg, Exhibit, Eminem, Corrupt, Mary J. Blige, and a few others as well. So to me, this is just a perfect hip hop album to start off the new millennium with. And Dr. Dre's The Chronic 2001 is definitely a hip hop rap album that I don't hear a lot of people talk about in the BC. And it's very underrated, in my opinion. But yeah, Dr. Dre's The Chronic 2001 is just a perfect hip hop rap album to end the 90s on. And this is just an excellent album overall. Definitely check it out if you're into that late 90s, early 2000s rap hip hop era. And the last album that I'm going to choose for this thread response is Hatebreed's Supremacy. This is just a very underappreciated metalcore album. Like they use like early in their career, they're more of a hardcore band, but I feel like on this one they definitely embrace that metalcore-ish sound and sound more metalcore than your typical hardcore band. But either way, these songs on Hatebreed's Supremacy is just really fast, aggressive, and pulls no punches, and got some really good chugging riffs that'll have your head banging. Hatebreed Supremacy is definitely an underrated album that doesn't really get talked about much. which is kind of sad. But yeah, if you're into that hardcore metalcore sound from the mid 2000s, you can't go wrong with Hatebreed's Supremacy. This is some excellent stuff, in my opinion. Definitely check it out if you haven't. Hatebreed's Supremacy. Good stuff. And that's it. Those are 10 underrated albums that gets no love in the VC, but those 10 albums needs to be talked about, needs to be listened to more, and needs to be brought up more. So, yeah, if you haven't checked any of those albums out, I definitely recommend checking them out. Those are some very awesome gems, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's it, and thanks for watching.